Hey everyone, Ryu here. Alright, this is a video in response to Eten Grimm, who made a comment on one of my previous live streams where I've been talking about net neutrality. There are some concerns that he has, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to respond to this in video form because, as you all know, I'm not a huge fan of typing out novels in the comments section. So, get started. Alright, Eten Grimm says, the problem with rural area small business is that regulations increase startup costs to the point to which they cannot even risk it. Result is no competition and screwed over customers. I do not disagree with this. I actually do agree with that very much so. But the thing is with that, that actually doesn't have to do with net neutrality. So I think that was a comment on maybe something else that I had done in the video. Unlike what I usually do, I haven't gone through and rewatched my video on it. But the thing is with this, I do agree with that. There are way too many regulations out there for small business owners. I fully agree with that. In fact, I think I've said it before. But so no point of contention here. But then we get into the crux of the matter. As for the blocking of websites, that will only get worse with net neutrality. The government will be the decider for all content. If someone wants to try and challenge that, there's a shit ton of prerequisites that must be met, as well as massive fines. Can't cut it? Oh well. Well, the thing is at that point, I actually have to call bullshit on this. The reason why I'm going to call bullshit on this is because if the government was going to be blocking sites using net neutrality, they would have already done so. That isn't what net neutrality is about. What net neutrality is about keeping the free flow of information equal amongst the internet. In other words, no fast laning, no throttling, no blocking, all that sort of thing. The only sites that are allowed to be blocked are sites that have like child pornography or something like that, but they don't even do a good job of that. So the thing is at that point, I don't get where this concern is coming from. If it was going to have happened, it would have already have happened by now. So I don't get where that assertion comes into play here. Next, monopolies exist, therefore we need regulation. That is the most circular logic I've ever heard. I like Bing, but I also don't try to do research, so I don't find any problems for the most part. As such, I use Google. There are other search engines if you try to find them. You put out net neutrality, well, if Google pays enough under the table, bye-bye Bing and DuckDuckGo. Regulations do not and will never stop and will never help the little guy because all the crooks work under the table and in the back alleys anyways. You think you understand what you're saying. However, this comes down to personal choice and not a failure of the free market. Change doesn't happen from rules and strict laws. It happens from those who try to upset the balance. All right, let's go ahead and unpack that. No regulation equals less monopolies? How? Point to any capitalist society that has absolutely no regulations, and I will point you to a capitalist society that is run by monopolies in every field. But the thing is net neutrality actually doesn't have anything to do necessarily with monopolies. It can be used to help dissuade monopolies online. It can. But it also isn't meant specifically to combat monopolies. So at this point, I'm not sure where you're trying to go with this. You know who is supposed to fight monopolies is the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. So if you've got a problem with monopolies, if you've got a problem with the government not stomping these monopolies out that we have, and I'll cover this later, then you need to complain to the FTC, not to the FCC. Well, not in particular. The FTC has been failing to uphold the laws that we already have. The FCC could, in some ways, help with this, but it would be very limited. The vast majority of this is on the FTC. And I'm not defending the FCC here. I'm just saying their authority there is actually very limited. So, let's go. And what you're describing with the pay under the table thing, that getting rid of net neutrality would actually make so they don't have to do it under the table. They could do it wide out in the open. It would make it completely legal. As it is right now, what you're describing is illegal, and if they get caught doing it, they can get with fines, and people's heads can roll from the company, as well as people can get arrested or businesses being shut down. But getting rid of net neutrality, guess what? The only ramifications would be social ramifications at that point. Social and business. There would actually be no legal ramifications for them doing it. So they wouldn't have to do it in the shadows anymore. So what, you want to bring them out from the back alleys and let them just get away with it right in front of everyone? Oh yeah, you think we have anarchy right now? Well, you got another thing coming. Problem in this case isn't the FCC and net neutrality, but a problem with the FTC and them not enforcing anti-monopoly laws, like I said before, as well as legislative bodies not closing the loopholes, such as a company buying, the majority of voting stock in another smaller company or several other smaller companies that are maybe just getting started up, so that they have control over them, but they're still technically separate entities. That is a loophole that is in there. It is one that is commonly used. You also have these partial mergers that end up happening where a company buys out another company but says that they're hands off. So that means they're separate companies, and that means they're actually technically self-competing. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if you're going to complain about that aspect of it, it's all like, the problem isn't the regulation, it's the lack of enforcement of the regulation. So maybe bitch about that, instead of saying, well, the regulation isn't being enforced, so let's get rid of it and just make it legal so that there's no legal recourse whatsoever at any point. Another issue is that at local and state governments, this kind of goes back to the problem up at the top, but it also has to do with this. And I brought it up in the last live stream. But local and state governments can block businesses from coming into an area. This makes those under-the-table payoffs even easier to pull off. This needs to be taken out. No local or state government should be able to stop businesses from coming into the area. Period. End of story. I keep hearing all these people saying, states' rights and local government rights. Well, the thing is they're overriding federal, and that's a problem. I believe in a very limited federal government, but the stuff that the federal government does have in there, I don't think that state and local governments should be able to override federal at any point. I really don't think that's the case. But also at the same time, I can't be fully on that because I'm perfectly fine with states saying, you know what, here pot's legal. But they also don't stop the federal government from coming in and enforcing. So that's kind of a weird point. But yeah, net neutrality actually stops ISPs from silencing those who are trying to upset the balance. Like you said, change doesn't happen from strict laws, it happens from those who try to upset the balance. But those laws can actually protect those who are trying to upset the balance. And at this point, this stops the ISPs from being bought out or being taken over by some social justice mentality or some feminist ideology, and them just actively saying, you know what, we're going to block sites like all MRA sites, all MGTOW sites, all alternative media, all pro-gun, all pro-life, all non-PC sites, basically. That's what this is stopping right now. That flimsy piece of paper is what is between us being actively legally silenced and us having a fighting chance and actually being able to get our voices out there. Because without Title II, you're going to have yourself a real fucking problem. Because that means that ISPs can go ahead, just actively take money from these groups. Or also have, because all that power has been focused into one area, they're also ripe for other organizations like, I don't know, maybe the Anti-Defamation League or something like that, coming in and blackmailing them. And or bribing them. To go ahead and make those pesky MGTOW websites go away. Make those pesky anti-feminist websites go away. Or to make things like Facebook get rid of anything that's more right-leaning than Jane Fonda, to quote Milo. I don't think you realize how detrimental this will be. But I've covered this before, but I guess I have to cover it again. Companies are not bound by the Constitution when it comes to freedom of expression. The government is. Yet you want to hand that force and power, as you so called it, over to companies that are already taking those underhanded deals and aren't bound by the First Amendment. Brilliant idea. Brilliant. Fantastic. 100% brilliant. Do you also recommend spooning a lathe? By getting rid of net neutrality, you're giving carte blanche to ISPs the ability to censor anyone for any reason. That might be because someone pays them to do so, or because the head or the leading body at an ISP has a certain ideology that they want to push. And here's another little tidbit. That hate speech is free speech ruling we just got from the Supreme Court, you know, the one that everyone's happy about, gone. Irrelevant. Poof. This will get rid of that. Because the thing is at that point, the government can't come in and say, oh, you're blocking them because they have a different political view than what you like? Well, that's not okay. You are getting rid of the government's ability to actually say, no, if you're going to allow any speech on there, you have to allow all speech on there. At least as far as the ISPs. Because the thing is they can't do that with individual businesses. As far as like platforms and such. However, ISPs are your gateway to this information. They are the ones who should have to keep all those gates open. Now, Facebook, Google, whatever, they can go ahead and censor shit. But like you've said, there are other options out there. But those options will go away if the ISPs have their way of it. Because that means Google can sit there and pay all these ISPs to be the only game in town. Legally. wide out in the open. So, Eten says, every argument for net neutrality can be countered by a single point. How can someone get away with something without force? Subterfuge, motherfucker. Subterfuge. Requires absolutely no force whatsoever. And it's more effective, both cost and time-wise. Government is force and power. It isn't the people. Who wields this power? Whomever can buy interest of said force of their goal for their goal. Well, guess what? You're trying to put that force and power into the hands of a much less regulated, much less chained down group of people that have already shown that they are corrupt, just as corrupt as the people who already have it, who have those extra chains on them. So maybe take that into consideration. And unlike with government, we can't vote people out of who's in charge of these ISPs. We can't. Now, please explain to me how you think that regulations will work. I understand net neutrality. I'm MGTOW, and I cannot understand where you're coming from. Google and Facebook are for net neutrality. Those same crooks you hate. For fuck's sake, I have this feeling you aren't the one that understands net neutrality. If you can prove me wrong, I'll accept your argument. Well, it sounds like you're confused on what net neutrality is and or does. It makes it so that ISPs cannot fast lane select sites or services, cannot block any sites or throttle sites that are legal. They have to give the same amount of connection speed to everyone. The only limiting factor as far as connection speed are concerned should be the servers themselves, where the site is being hosted. And I'm also going to go on and say, as far as the whole Google and Facebook are for net neutrality, the same crooks you hate, just because someone I hate likes a thing or is in favor of a thing, it does not mean that I can't feel a positive feeling about that thing. Doesn't mean I can't like that thing. If Google was to suddenly be pro-MGTOW and anti-feminist, that wouldn't make me instantly turn into a feminist and start trashing MGTOW. You say you're a MGTOW. Well, if you are a MGTOW, then start thinking like a man. Stop thinking of this as a zero-sum game. Stop thinking of this as in only black and white. This is a situation that is high stakes. And at this point, I'm going to just say this. It sounds like you're letting your anti-government and anti-Google, and I can't blame you for any one of those mentalities, but it sounds like it's like you're allowing those mentalities to override your reasoning skills. And it sounds like you're trying to make some pretty bullshit excuses for trying to get rid of that last little bit of thing that the government's ever done right. And I'm not meaning this as a personal attack. But I don't think you've honestly thought this through. I don't think you've honestly listened to what I've been saying about net neutrality. I really don't. And it's quite irritating to me that I have to go ahead and make this video, even though I've answered the vast majority of these in past videos. I'm getting so sick and tired of people saying that net neutrality is bad because it's a regulation by the government. Not every regulation by the government is bad. I'm not going to say that a majority of them aren't bad. I'm not going to say that. But when you're looking at shit like this, you have to look at it individually. You can't sit there and say, oh, well, all these other things are bad, so there's got to be something bad underlying this. There has to be a way I can blame all of the ills that are going on in society on this. Because the thing is, at that point, you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. This is actually one of the few things that the government's done right. because it puts that threat of force behind the First Amendment when it comes to ISPs and the First Amendment. It's one of the only areas where the government's been able to come in and say, you know what, you actually have to abide by this. And you know what? I am 100% for it. As long as it's a neutral fucking thing, which this is as neutral as it can be. It actually says, ISPs, you have to provide open internet. No preferential treatment, nothing like that. I highly recommend that you go through and rewatch my videos. And I highly recommend that you go ahead and listen to what I'm saying. Not for an, I gotcha. But listen to the spirit of what I'm saying. Now, you're free to disagree with me. I don't got a problem with that. But in this, you made several major mistakes. You contradicted yourself in this. At some points, you even argued in favor of net neutrality without meaning it. And that shows me that you don't exactly have a full understanding of what net neutrality is. And I'm not saying that you don't know what net neutrality is, but I'm thinking that you're also conflating it with other bits of government and other bits of legislation. I think you're thinking too much into net neutrality. Net neutrality in itself, as far as Title II is concerned, is very basic and it serves one purpose. So you can go ahead, you can feel free to disagree with me. But the thing is at this point, net neutrality is doing much more good than it is harm. In fact, I have yet to see any harm that net neutrality is doing. The only harm that I'm seeing is coming from the FTC not doing its job to its fullest potential. Not enforcing the laws that are in place. So, if you've got a problem with something, take it up with the FTC. But don't sit there and say we need to get rid of legislation because this one governing body isn't enforcing it. Because then all you're doing is taking away the protection. You're taking away their ability to enforce it now. And when it comes to net neutrality, if we get rid of net neutrality, it opens us up to blatant and open censorship, bought and paid for by Big Pharma, by giant conglomerates like Google, automobile industries, insurance industries, basically any SJW funded bullshit. And if you think George Soros is an issue now, well, just figure it this way. By getting rid of net neutrality, you're giving George Soros full ability to censor any and all dissenting voices. Because if anyone can buy out these ISPs, it's George Soros. But he doesn't even have to go that far. All he has to do is throw them a little bit of money and they'll wag their tail for him.